Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like to take better pictures in only 11 days, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/11 days. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a review of the Sigma 85 1.4 DG DN art lens, and I will be comparing it to the Sony 85 1.4 G Master lens as well. So what did I photograph this time around? Well, I took the 85 Sigma out to photograph a model named Nina, where we spent some time indoors, outdoors, near the brick walls, getting sample images shooting with the Sony A7R4. And since this is a comparison between the 85 Sigma and the 85 Sony, we also brought Nina back the next day to come into the studio to do some locked off shots to try and get the same exact image with both lenses on the same exact camera with the same exact settings to try and show you and tell you which one turned out better. On top of all of that, you get to download sample raw files so that you can pixel peep to decide for yourself which lens might be right for you. Now let's get into the specs of the Sigma lens. This has an entirely new optical formula that is designed specifically for mirrorless cameras. That's why it has a DN printed on it. If it didn't have the DN on it, that is basically an older Sigma art lens that they retrofitted to work on some of the new mirrorless cameras. This is completely new, and it's for E Mount, and also the
E Mount Alliance.
Which I almost forgot existed, by the way. I forgot that the L mount was even a thing for a while. The DN version of the 85 Sigma is an inch shorter than the HSM version, as well as a pound lighter. They really did shed a lot of weight in this lens. When you pick it up and you take it out of the box, you're like, that's it? That's how light this is? Yeah, that's because it weighs in at 1.39 pounds or 630 grams versus Sony's that weighs in at 1.81 pounds or 820 grams. You know, in terms of size, let me grab the 50 1.4 non-DN. This is just the DG 1.4. It's 200 grams heavier than the 85 1.4, and you can see that it's larger. That's because it's not designed specifically for the new mirrorless cameras. Now let's compare the height of the Sigma to this Sony one right here. This is Sony's G Master 85 1.4. It is about a ½ an inch smaller, the Sigma is, than the Sony. In terms of lens caps, we've got a 77mm filter thread on this bad boy right here, and we have a 77mm filter thread on this bad boy over here as well. Now, picking up this Sigma once again, on the side of the lens, you have your AF to manual switch. That's normal. You've got a button here that you can set to be your IAF or whatever you'd like to set it to. I personally don't set it to anything. You have a clickable and declickable aperture ring, so you would go like this to have it be off and this to be on. But guess what else you have, Steven? Guess what this lens has that I've always asked for? This right here. Are you zoomed in on that? He is zoomed in on this. This is an aperture lock switch. It's off. I can rotate it. It's on. It's locked. Oh, it's funny. I've been asking for that forever. So when I take this out of the bag, I don't have to worry that it got like F2 or 2.8 and it's not just stuck on A, because I control everything inside of the camera anyway. The Sony, on the other hand, is just completely independent. You could click or not click, but there's no way that you can just leave it locked on A. So you can still run the risk of changing it when you take it out of the bag. When you're trying to move quick, it's just one more thing that you have to worry about. Now let's dive into some of the sample images that I got when I used the new Sigma lens on the A7R4 the other day. I just love, when you zoom in on this, how tack sharp the eye is. Nice colors, nice tones came out of this. A lot of that is the A7R4. The IAF, the lock-on tracking, is fantastic, and we all know that inside of this camera, especially with the 61 megapixels. Next image right here, moved in a little closer, but you can see how nice and tack sharp it is on the eye. All of these are shot at 1.4. Now, I know some people are like, Jared, why did you shoot these at 1.4? You shouldn't shoot portraits at 1.4. Look, if you can do it, why not do it? If you have IAF and lock-on tracking and that helps you do it, then you can continue to do it. If you like what it gives you in a portrait, then do it. It's your personal choice. If you want to shoot at f4 because you want more of the face in focus, then do it. Don't bitch at me, just do it. So I should have painted the picture for you where I was shooting. We were over at my new place. We used the window light coming in from my front windows to just be the natural light when I was photographing Nina to get these different types of portraits. She just stood there in that cool spot, and she's a great model because she works her hands really well. She works her eyes really well. She smiles when I need her to smile. She works out really well as a model. So moving on to the next shot, she just moved into this pose. And I will tell you this, when you're working with models that know what they're doing, it makes your life so much easier. One of the things that I always have to tell models that know how to model is stop the movement stuff, because every time they hear the shutter, they're always moving. It's like click, 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 I'm gonna get it. I'm like, Nina, can you please just hold for a couple of, I'll tell you when to move again, because it's just one of those things. I want to take a picture and I see something, but you already moved before I already got the next shot and I have to get my composition right, all of that. So just let your models know, the good ones, they'll work with you because they know what they're doing. I just like the background being blown out right here. Now, in terms of background bokeh, there are 11 rounded aperture blades in both of these lenses. Now, when you take a look at a side-by-side comparison, look at which one is sharper. Oh, that's right, the Sigma one is looking sharper with less CA around the bokeh. So you make your mind up which bokeh you like. Moving on to the next image, she was just looking at my cat who was sitting on his bubble wrap and she was smiling, so I took this shot. I'm really happy with it. In terms of focus speed, the focus seems pretty darn fast to me. There are stepping motors inside of this Sigma lens. There's also the same type of motors inside of the Sony lens, or similar type of motors, which does lead to the question, being that this is a comparison, is which one focuses quicker? Now, in our studio test that we did here, Steven would focus in on the subject, then move it to the background, then move it back to the subject, and they're very similar. It is possible that the Sigma did really well here and did slightly better. I will say that when I do shoot with the Sony version, I've noticed one of these quick stutters. It looks like this. It's like, and that's when you first try to acquire it. Now, it acquires fast and accurately, but I didn't notice that in the Sigma version. So they're very similar when it comes to the speed of the focus. Moving on to the next image, outdoors 1.4. She's holding up the wall. That's why she's smiling, because I'm like, oh yeah, hold up the wall. That's right, hold it up. But this is just giving you an example of full body, 1.4 locked in on the face. What does the background look like? What does the brick look like? Take a look at it, download these raw files. Then with a deeper background, I was in a shaded area, so you can see that raw file. You can play with them to brighten up the shadows underneath her eyes. If that's what you'd like to do, you can play with these files for personal use to pixel peep. But when you zoom in on the eye, you can see how nice the reflection is. We're at 100 ISO, 1/2000th of a second at f1.4 outdoors. Let me cut in here real quick and remind you that the Super Huger Mega Camera giveaway is going on right now, where I'm giving one of you the chance to win a camera or lenses valued up to $4,999. Now, it's completely free to get entered over at bit.ly/megafro2020. And if you'd like to score some extra entries, pick up FroPack 1, FroPack 2, or the bundle. Or if you already picked them up, you will score extra entries automatically. But remember, there is no purchase necessary to win the grand prize. Now, let's get back to the video. I felt really at home using this lens. I don't use an 85 very often because I do like the 135 Sigma or the 135 G Master from Sony for when I'm doing portraits, but indoors in tighter spaces, an 85 might be a good option for you. So I felt that it paired really well with the A7R4, which means it's going to pair well with the A7 III, the future A7 IV, as well as the A9 and the A9 II. So after shooting a couple sample images outdoors, we went ahead and moved indoors and worked with the mannequins that I purchased that scare the shit out of me every time I walk into my house because they're very lifelike and I think somebody's in my house.
I think this was a bad idea.
But I love the tones and the colors that we got to pull off of this image. And the final image here, before we get into the comparison, putting these two lenses up against each other, is just another cool shot of Nina inside. I just liked the way that the light was coming in through the window. So this was to wrap up the day. We got the shot and I really enjoyed shooting with this lens. All right, so that was me taking photos with just the Sigma lens and not comparing it to the Sony. But we all know that you want to know, should you get the Sigma 85 1.4 art lens, or should you go with the 85 1.4 G Master? Now, these are the only two 1.4 options that you have natively for Sony E Mount. So what we did is we set up a portrait shoot here at the factory. We set up some bokeh ball type things in the background with our palm trees to give you nice bokeh in the background. We had Nina sit on the stool. Steven set up our Kino Flow light so that we had consistent, continuous light, that it would be even and the same exact thing from one lens to the other. Shot with the A7R4 with both lenses at the same exact shutter speed, 1/125th of a second, 100 ISO, f1.4 with IAF with continuous lock-on focus to start. Give you that native ISO and give you the best quality file that you could get out of this A7R4. And also, locked it off on a tripod so everything was exactly the same. The only thing that we changed was taking one lens off and putting the other lens on. Everything is exactly the same. So now I want to send this upstairs so that we can take a closer look, zoom in 1:1, zoom in 3:1, and see which lens did the best. All right, so let's take a look at these two images. On the left, we have the one taken with the Sigma. On the right, we have the one taken with the Sony G Master. Now let's zoom in 1:1 on the eyeballs. All right, at 1:1, they both look really good. The Sony looks fine, the Sigma looks fine, but now we're gonna go in 3:1. Let me turn over here and just tell you, normally I'm not pixel peeping to the nth degree, but if we're comparing the Sigma and we're comparing the Sony and they both look good at 1:1 and one of them looks better at 3:1 than the other, maybe that tells you something. So here we are zoomed in 3:1 and you can see that the Sigma is just coming out sharper 3:1. Same camera, same settings, on the tripod. We did our best to try and replicate the same thing as best as possible time and time again. And this is one of the best of the Sony images that we got. It's one of the sharpest that we got. Because right off the rip, I was taking pictures with the Sony and I'm like, zooming in on the back of the screen, like, these don't look sharp. Do we have a bad copy of the lens? Is there something wrong with this lens? It was hitting like every third or fourth shot with the IAF. It was perceivably in focus, and then every other one or every other third one I was like, no, this isn't working out too well. So that's when I put the timer on the camera and it did better on the timer. But that doesn't make sense because the Sigma did fine not on the timer. So then I was thinking, is there a problem with the lens? And so what we did is we got Sony to send us another lens, and then we did a test with an even better model, me. It's a picture of me. So on the left-hand side, again, we have the Sigma. On the right-hand side, we have a second copy of the Sony lens. And let's zoom in 1:1. All right, at 1:1, it kind of looks similar, even though the Sigma does look slightly sharper. And now 3:1, we're gonna go in on the eyeballs. And if you look at this eye right here, my left eye, you can see that the Sigma is definitely sharper than the Sony. The last thing we wanted to do was put this review out, this comparison out, if we saw an issue with the Sony and not actually try a second version, because now we know for sure that the Sigma is just sharper. At 3:1, it's sharper, which means it's sharper at 1:1. It also hit time and time again when I was taking photos. The Sony didn't hit time and time again. So another thing that we tried to do is go to 1/400th of a second at 400 ISO with this one on the right. This is the Sony is on the right, and on the left, of course, it's still the Sigma, but that one is done at 1/125th of a second at 100 ISO. Of course, there's a difference between 400 and 100, but this is to show you that it actually looks slightly better this time on the Sony compared to the Sony at 100. So maybe there's something going on where that lens has trouble focusing if it's a slower shutter speed. And that's something that I ran into when using the A7R4 when it first came out. When my shutter speeds were slower, I had trouble getting repeatable shots in focus that should have been, because you have image stabilization inside of the body and you have a fast enough shutter speed. But again, we hit time and time again with the Sigma, and the Sigma has done a really fantastic job. And in the last test that I did, I got as close as possible to try out the close focusing capability, but to the point where the IAF still showed up over the eye. Now, sometimes if you get super close and you're within that close focusing distance, the IAF doesn't always pick up in the Sony, and that's similar to what happened here. Because on the left, even though it looks like I was able to get closer, even though that Sigma lens, technically, you can't get as close as the Sony, I was able to do it. And with the Sony on the right-hand side, this is where I was able to get the IAF and still be at the closest point and have it work. So when we zoom in 1:1, they both look pretty good here. The Sigma, as we've seen all along, looks fantastic. The Sony, in this case, being that we're at 1/400th of a second and ISO 400, looks better. It did a much better job at a faster shutter speed, but you really should be able to shoot at base ISO, and mean 1/125th of a second at 85 millimeters at 1.4. If I can do it with the Sigma, I should be able to replicate that with the Sony as well. Now, before I send it back downstairs to myself, there's one more thing that I want to show you. Take a look at this image. This is reset. This is straight out of the camera raw, but I want to run it through Golden Grams from FroPack 2. With one click, this is what Golden Grams looks like. That's without Golden Grams. This is with Golden Grams. It gives me a pretty good starting point because I could tweak clarity. Oh yeah, bring it back just to do that, and I can tweak maybe the tint, because I don't like what it's doing, or I like what it's doing. But the whole point of this is that this gives you a really good starting point to help speed up your raw workflow. And we created 15 all new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack2. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters. If you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. And if you pick up FroPack 1 and FroPack 2 together and get the FroPack bundle, you can save even more. Now, let's throw it back downstairs to Jared. Well, that was interesting. I did not expect to see those results. And I also found it interesting that we thought maybe we had a bad Sony lens or one that may have been a little soft, but getting that second copy to really determine that it's not us and it wasn't the first lens, that there's multiple lenses that do the same exact thing, it shows us that the Sigma is better at 1.4 wide open than this Sony. So I've been holding off on telling you the prices of these lenses. The Sigma comes in at $1,200, which is $600 less than the Sony, which comes in at $1,800. $1,800, and it's almost 5 years old. It's much older than the Sigma. But before I tell you which one I think you should buy, there are two very important tests. That is the Sniff Test and the Wind Tunnel Test. We're only gonna sniff the Sigma because we've already sniffed this other one in the past. Here we go, Steven. Are you ready on my nose?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It smells like the winds of change are coming. The winds of change. Well, actually, the wind tunnel test is coming, but it is the wind of change. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, it was a tie. It was a tie on the wind tunnel test. So who's this lens for, and which one do I think you should go with, and why? Look, if you're going to be doing portraits and you can't afford, say, the 135 1.8 and you want something like the 85, I prefer an 85 over a 50 for portraits. It is a very solid lens. It's also shorter than the 135, so if you're in a tighter space, you don't have to try and back up as far, or you can still get a better portrait framing because you don't have to worry about shooting super duper tight. The 85 is a nice option. This Sigma did extremely well. You know how sharp it is. You know how nice the tones and colors look. You know how good the Sony A7R4 is. You know how good the autofocus capability is, and this lens kept up with it without a problem. So this lens gets like 300 check marks for being a solid lens. At the end of the day, which one do I think you should buy? I think this is a no-brainer. How could I not recommend the Sigma at $600 less, and it's sharper wide open at 1.4? You could see it. It's plain as day right there. Yes, at 1:1, it's very hard to tell the differences. They are very subtle. But if you go in 3:1 on a 61 megapixel camera and you look and you're like, oh snap, that one's in focus and that one's a little softer, I don't know, maybe that comes in handy in the future. But I think out of everything that I've said, it's really the $600 difference. This would fit in my Sony bag, my Sony kit bag, without a problem. Why? Because I have a 35 1.2 from Sigma. I have a 14 to 24 2.8. I have a 135 1.8. I have a 105 1.4, which is massive that I don't exactly take around all the time, but half of my bag is filled with Sigma lenses when I'm shooting with the Sony cameras. So if you want to pick this bad boy up, it is available at the end of August. You could always go to allenscamera.com to pick one up to support a mom and pop store because they've supported me since day one. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and download those raw files so that you can look at the comparisons for yourself and make an informed decision on which one is right for you. So thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.